Today we're going to continue our discussion from the other day where we talked about European expansion and now touch on other parts of the world that the Europeans are going to come in contact with, whether they be in Africa or in India or in China or Japan. But they all share this common thread in the early modern era of having European contacts. Starting with Africa. We know from the 10th century on we've got some kingdoms that are developing in Africa. Ghana, Mali, and then Songhay, and they're conveniently put in alphabetical order for us to remember better. These kingdoms in sub-Saharan Africa are going to grow in stature for a couple reasons. If you guys recall, what religion is going to make its way into first Ghana, then Mali and Songhay? Islam. Very good. And what about Islam would make the adoption of Islam by these kingdoms allow their kingdoms to grow larger? Yes. Okay, well, there's an emphasis on the importance of merchants. And what kind of merchant activity are these kingdoms going to be involved in? Gold, trading gold and salt across trans-Saharan trade networks, absolutely. But politically speaking, what about Islam is going to help these states become stronger, more centralized states? And I want to see Mr. Serhai say this. Knowledge. Knowledge of what?
Knowledge of Reddit exists.
Just knowledge? Okay. I want more. Farrah.
They have one leader who is both the political and religious.
Very good. Okay, you've got this notion of a caliph within the Islamic empires, right? And that there is a political and a spiritual leader kind of wrapped into one individual, right? And that will be adopted by these kingdoms of sub-Saharan Africa, which is going to give those leaders more, fancy word that's popped up a couple times, the right, like when people believe that someone has a right to rule them. We call that, yes sir? Legitimacy, very good. It's going to give them a little bit more legitimacy, all right? You're not just the political ruler because your dad was the king. You're also the leader of the Islamic faith. Yes, Hannah in the back. I wouldn't call it the mandate of heaven because we don't want to confuse it with Chinese mandate of heaven. But yeah, I guess similar. That they are on earth. Now, different in the sense that with the mandate of heaven, the emperors themselves in China weren't seen as gods or anything like that, or as even religious figures, but they were bestowed by the heavens the right to rule. Whereas the leaders of the Islamic caliphates or these sub-Saharan African kingdoms see themselves as spiritual leaders, actual religious leaders. Yes?
When we're talking about the trade that's coming out of those areas, is that also contributing to the slave trade that happens?
Absolutely. Yep, they trade slaves as well. They trade slaves as well. Now, these kingdoms are predating, Songhai is going to run into it, but these kingdoms are predating when we here in the United States think about the slave trade, we think about the transatlantic slave trade. These predate that. But these are absolutely societies that have slaves, and these are absolutely societies that take part in a slave trade. Primarily their slave trade is trans-Saharan or going to the Middle East, to the Islamic caliphates in the Middle East. So that's where their slaves are going. All right, let's press on. We're going to get some other kingdoms that are going to develop and grow in stature because of their contact with Europeans. This is a depiction of a king of Congo. Congo is a West African kingdom. And we can see it's kind of hard to make out in your drawing here. We've got the king up here. This is the African Congo king, Kongo, king. Today there's a country called Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Same rough place. The old one we call it with a K. So here is the king of Congo, and then here you got this mustachioed, bearded white dude from Portugal, right? And he's kind of bowing down in reverence. What does this picture show us about the relationship between European powers in the 1500s and the African kingdoms that they're going to come in contact with? Yes, sir? Mutual. Okay, there's a mutual respect, but it's almost not even a mutual respect here, right? The king is up on his throne. The king is not coming down off his throne to meet this Portuguese man eye to eye, the Portuguese guy is bowing down. Because what does he probably recognize? There's not a lot that he and Portugal can do. And we mentioned the other day, what was it about Portugal that is going to make their overseas expansion somewhat different from later empires? Yes? Its location makes it easier to explore. But what makes it harder for them to like conquer territories outright? Yes? They're relatively small. They're relatively small. So what Portugal is looking for here is not a conquering of West Africa. They're looking for trade relationships with West Africa. They see something that they can gain from Congo. And on the flip side, Congo has something to gain from Portugal. The Portuguese have products, finished products, manufactured goods, guns, that they can trade with West African kingdoms. And the West African kingdoms have slaves that they can trade with Portugal. So this is going to be a mutually beneficial relationship, all right, at this point. Now, spoiler alert for what's going to come in about a month and a half, all right? Eventually, European powers in Africa with bigger guns, with better ships, steamships that are going to allow them to make their way up the very challenging rivers on the coast of Africa. They're going to begin to wholesale conquer the entire African continent. They can't do that yet. They're not ready for that yet. So at this point, all that the Portuguese are doing in West Africa is setting up what are known as factories. Now, we don't want to think of like factories as in an industrial sense. They're basically trading posts, storehouses to trade goods. And trading posts, especially when we're talking next week about the transatlantic slave trade. So this is the kind of relationship we're dealing with in West Africa. So the kingdoms of West Africa, like Congo, or I'm going to mention a couple others. You guys read about the Dahomey Kingdom or Ashanti Kingdom. You guys remember reading about those? Or come across them? Those are smaller. Here's Dahomey and Asante. They're in West Africa. These are all West African states that will become more powerful than they were before because of their trade contacts with Europeans. They're giving slaves, they're trading slaves, they're getting guns in return, which makes them more powerful than their neighbors who might live further inland, who aren't having that kind of access with the Portuguese. Everybody cool on that? Dahomey and Asante. There's others, but for our purpose, this is just AP World. We're going pretty quick. We want to have a couple examples and move on with life. All right? Yeah, these are kingdoms. These are African kingdoms, but they're going to have contact with European slave traders, and they're going to become richer because of that. They will trade slaves for other products too, but especially for guns. So now they start getting some guns, which makes them more powerful. All right? They don't make their own guns in Africa. They don't have their own guns in Africa. Yes, Alex.
Was this with Portugal or all of Western Europe?
This is mostly Portugal, because who was dabbling in Western Africa before anybody else? Portugal. So who was establishing trade contacts before anybody else got there? Portugal was. Who was creating relationships with those kings before anybody else? Portugal was. But eventually other European nations are going to enter those as well.
So,
good.
And also Dahomey and Asante are the main African trade cities?
They're African kingdoms that benefited from this mutual trade with European powers. Within your standards also, we want to recognize that all of Africa is not experiencing the exact same situation. Way down in South Africa, especially in the southwestern part of Africa, the Dutch East India Company is early on in this exploration, in this expansion, going to establish a colony in South Africa. All right? You guys notice there's something here called the Orange Free State? There's actually a river across South Africa that's called the Orange River. Can you guys think of a country in Europe that... you follow soccer? What color does the Dutch soccer team, does the soccer team of the Netherlands wear?
Orange.
Orange. It's a big color for them, okay?
And the king is the king of...
From the royal family from the Netherlands, they're from the House of Orange. Orange is a big color for the Dutch. So the Dutch, under the Dutch East India Company, are going to enter into South Africa. And a group of people of Dutch descent will begin to live and work and farm the land in South Africa. We'll talk more about these people a little bit later in the class, but they're called Boers. B-O-E-R-S. Boers. They're the Dutch folks, the Dutch descendants in South Africa.
How do you spell that?
Boers. B-O-E-R-S. It's on your standards. Hannah.
When you say South Africa, do you mean the country or just like?
I'm saying there is no country of South Africa. So I'm just saying like the southern chunk of Africa, which today is the country of South Africa. But then there is no country of South Africa. But the origins of the country of South Africa begins with these Dutch arriving. Now much later, the British are going to get involved in South Africa as well. And in fact, another spoiler, in the 1800s, there's going to be a couple wars between the Boers and the British, called the Boer Wars. Don't worry about that right now. We're going to get there eventually. But, of course, there's people besides the Dutch in South Africa. Local indigenous tribes, right? And the one that we are going to care about most in this class is a group of people known as the Zulu. Z-U-L-U. And we can see them, in this early on map, the Zulu land here in the eastern part of South Africa. The Zulu is just an African tribe in the eastern part of southern Africa, who of course are going to be running into these Boers, right? The Dutch descendants. And they'll come in conflict with them, because they want the land that the Boers are now occupying. And then later, spoiler, don't worry about writing this now, the British are going to be going to war against the Zulu, as the British are trying to conquer this area outright. But as of right now, we're just talking about initial contacts. All right? Good. We know a little bit about Africa now. Excellent. Everybody happy? Good. Let's move to India. All right. The Portuguese, again, important to the story. The Portuguese are the ones that travel south to go around Africa, right? Why are they going? We did this the other day, but to refresh our memories, here's Portugal, here's Europe, here are the riches of East Asia. As the crow flies, have you guys heard that phrase before? As the crow flies, it's like the closest point between two distances. But we often, like as the crow flies, my house is much closer to where I am right now compared to how I have to drive there, where I zigzag on roads, because I can't drive like the crow flies. So as the crow flies, it's much faster to make it from here to here, going straight across the planet, right? Why do the Portuguese initially want to look for a different way to get there? Mr. Brown, Mrs. Brown. Mrs. Brown, you've got a lovely dog. Have you ever heard that song?
Oh yeah.
It's the Herman's Hermits from the 60s. Okay, go ahead. What? Ottoman Empire. So what?
They were taking money.
Okay, extracting tolls for traders that would go through. So what? Makes it more expensive. What else is the Ottoman Empire that the Portuguese and the Spanish wouldn't really want to deal with? Back in the back, Shelby. They're Muslims. Very good. And the Portuguese and the Spanish, more than anybody else, don't care much for dealing with Muslims. All right? They just had the Reconquista. So they want to avoid those Ottoman middlemen. Now again, if it was cheaper to do, they would have gotten over their dislike of the Muslim middlemen. But ultimately, this was the cheapest way to connect to the Eastern world, going across the open sea. It was the cheapest and fastest way to connect to the Eastern world, right?
It looks like it's going to be the fastest way.
It is! It is! Absolutely it is.
Oh.
Huh? Yeah, I mean, and like, as I'm making my way across, like, land routes, what do I come in contact with in here? A lot of mountain. I mean, this is not easy traveling here, all right? So it looks really, really, really far, but it ain't, right? It's just accept it.
How do you
All
go
right.
back if you go all the way and go to India?
You go back, there's a return route there.
All right. The city of Goa in India. Goa. The Portuguese early on, in the early 1500s, will conquer the city of Goa in West India. And they establish a trading post in Goa, which will be a conduit for Portugal for all of those goods and riches coming out of India, loaded onto Portuguese ships, making their way to Portugal itself. Portugal will hold on to its colony of Goa all the way until 1961. It's pretty wild. They hold on to it for 400 years. Another Indian city that we should be familiar with is Calcutta. This is on the other side of the Indian subcontinent, South Asia. Calcutta's over here. Calcutta is where the British East India Company will set up shop very early on. And by the 1700s, the British East India Company, and we're going to talk more about these trading companies, the British East India Company will make Calcutta their headquarters. All right? And Calcutta is going to be the entryway for the British Empire into India. Now at this time, much of India is ruled by another empire called the Mughal Empire, which we're going to read about and talk about next week. So the Mughals control all this. But the British get an entryway into Calcutta. All right? And eventually, you guys probably know, another spoiler for what's going to come, eventually the British are going to conquer all of the Indian subcontinent and make it their most important colony once they lose us. All right? India is going to become the crown jewel, as it said, of the British Empire. Yes?
Wait, so the British East India Company, they conquered Calcutta, but then it was a gateway for
And it's just an entry point. They've gotten into India, and from there they're going to expand to the rest of the Indian subcontinent. All right? Guys, what's crucial here is to understand that this European expansion is dramatically impacting other parts of the world, and we want to be familiar with a few of these geographic places to recognize when you hear Calcutta, you're thinking India, and you're thinking British getting involved in India. That's it. Another one, Hormuz, H-O-R-M-U-Z, Hormuz, or sometimes you might see O-R-M-U-Z, Hormuz. Today, we refer to this as the Straits of Hormuz. A strait is a narrow strip of water connecting two bigger chunks of water, like the Straits of Magellan that we talked about Ferdinand Magellan going through, right? The Straits of Magellan connecting the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean. The Straits of Gibraltar connecting... Yeah.
Connecting the African continent and the European continent.
See, okay, no, not really. Very good. Straits connect two bodies of water. So it's between Africa and Spain, but it's connecting the Mediterranean and the Atlantic Ocean. Straits of, did I hear one more? Straits of Malacca. Look at you guys. The Straits of Malacca, very good, between the Malay Peninsula and Indonesia. The Straits of Mackinac.
Straits of Yemen.
Between Mackinac Island and, or between Upper Peninsula and Lower Peninsula. Excellent. The Straits of, what?
Yemen.
The Straits of Yemen.
Right there.
I guess there is, but I don't know if that's called that. But anyway, up here is the Straits of Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz. And Hormuz becomes an important trading post for the Portuguese. The Portuguese were the ones first making it around Africa and starting to bum around all of these places in East Africa and in the Middle East, all the way to India. So Hormuz becomes an important port city at the mouth of the Persian Gulf. This is the Persian Gulf, guys. This is getting into the Arabian Sea. All right? Yes, ma'am.
the strait that he was talking about is called Bab el Mandeb, or also known as Mandeb Strait. And the cool thing is that, like, in English, it's Bab el Mandeb, and Bab means door.
Oh, so it's like a door to the Middle East. Very interesting. Thank you. So the Portuguese are going to control Hormuz as well. Are we getting the picture that early on in this story, the Portuguese are doing really, really well in the Eastern Hemisphere? Yeah, absolutely. That's all we need to know about Hormuz. Now we move on to Japan. Yes, ma'am.
How was, I mean, I don't know how many people they had in these missions, but how was this, like, tiny country coming all the way from Europe able to conquer all of these?
Okay, and they're not going in and like knocking down doors and blasting away enemy armies. They're doing deals. They're making trade relationships. Hey, I can help you get money. You can help me get money. Let's start up a deal. We need to start a trading post here. And that's really how it begins. It's not in the beginnings. It's not the Portuguese conquering the world militarily. We're not there yet. All right, now we go to Japan. If we recall when we last left Japan, we talked about Japan being kind of falling apart, losing its centralization, and becoming a feudal state, where we have rival landowners called daimyo, rival landowners in competition with each other, right? We've got a feudal state in Japan. Centuries of warfare and decentralization from 1200 all the way until about 1600. In 1600, that comes to an end with this guy. His name is Tokugawa Ieyasu.
Spell it, please.
He's on your standards again. Tokugawa, Tokugawa. That's all one word. Tokugawa Ieyasu. Ieyasu. Tokugawa Ieyasu. Tokugawa, and he ushers in what's known as the Tokugawa shogunate. And it is under him that Japan will again become a strong centralized state. And we can see he's essentially going to be one of these military shoguns who is able to suppress other rivals, and he claims all of the land of Japan as his own. Like all of those daimyo, those landowners that you had your land and you had your land and you had your land, Tokugawa Ieyasu says, that's all my land. And no one can challenge his authority, so Japan again becomes centralized. But this is important to our story here, because prior to Tokugawa Ieyasu, guess who arrived in Japan in the 1500s? The Portuguese. The Portuguese. In 1542, the Portuguese are going to establish trade contacts with Japan. And more than any other goods that the Japanese could receive from Portugal, what do you think they like the best? Guns. The Japanese get guns from Portugal. And then shortly after the initial trade contacts, we're also going to see some Christian missionaries entering into Portugal. Or pardon me, they're already there. Entering into Japan and starting to convert some Japanese to Christianity. And the Portuguese are going to establish some important trade contacts with Japan, based out of the city of Nagasaki. It's not a crucial city for you guys to know, but you will hear about that again much later in history, because Nagasaki is the second city in 1945 that the United States drops an atomic bomb on in Japan to end World War II. So the Portuguese have important trade contacts now with Japan. Well, when Tokugawa Ieyasu comes to power in 1600, not only will he consolidate the power from the landowners and centralize the Japanese state, but he's also going to believe and feel that these Western influences on Japan are bad for Japanese culture and the Japanese people. He prohibits the practice of Christianity in Japan. He drives away most outsiders. Most Westerners are ousted from the nation. Japan will only have very limited trade contacts now with outside states. And that will continue in Japan from 1600s all the way until 1868. We'll talk about that at a later date, but this is Japan getting a brief glimpse into what's going on in the wider world, having contacts with Europe, right? And then saying, no, they're messing us up, all right? Because Tokugawa, one second, buddy. Tokugawa Ieyasu can look at other places in the Pacific. The Spanish are in the Philippines. The Dutch are in Indonesia. You can see what's going on around him. And those European countries are starting to more so dominate these Asian states. And Tokugawa Ieyasu doesn't want that from Japan. And so he is going to make Japan isolated. He's going to believe that Japan can be perfectly strong on its own. They don't need to have these contacts with the wider world. So it's going to begin a couple centuries of Japanese isolation, all right? that will take us all the way until the late 1800s. We'll talk about that again at a later date. You had something.
You were saying that the Japanese banned the practice of Christianity, then why didn't the Portuguese find that to use as an excuse to invade them wholesale?
They can't invade them. Okay, again, why can't the Portuguese go invading Japan wholesale? They're pequeño, or whatever the Portuguese word for that is. They're small. They're small. They don't have the ability to do that.
Last time Vietnam banned priests, the French invaded.
And that is the 1800s. That's the late 1800s. Bigger guns in the 1800s, right? Steamships in the late 1800s. The Portuguese don't have that, right? So they've got to have these trade relationships. So they can't, guys. Early expansion, early colonialism. Except for the Americas are the exception here. And the only reason, I'm going to ruin my lecture next week. The Americas will be the exception because European powers don't need big guns, even though they have some guns. They don't need the big guns to destroy American empires. What is going to destroy the Native Americans of the Americas? More than big guns, yes. Diseases, yeah. 90% of Native Americans will die within a couple centuries because of European diseases, old world diseases that they didn't have contact with, right? Well, guess what? China, Africa, Japan, they have contact with old world diseases. The Europeans aren't bringing new and foreign sicknesses to these parts of the world. So they can't be conquered yet. They will be conquered when Europeans develop bigger guns, when they develop better ships, and they develop a medicine that helps them not die from malaria. But we'll talk about that at a later date as well.
Really? Is that true?
Yes. I do not lie.
With the isolation,
That was a lie.
with the isolation, doesn't in Japan be like, kind of makes like them not like merchants as much?
Yeah, it was not so much that, I guess, as the belief, like, Japan was, despite its decentralization, Japan was a pretty advanced society, right? China was an advanced society. There wasn't, like when European traders can go down to Africa and trade a lot of, like, manufactured goods with West Africans that they just didn't have those things, well, guess what Japan and China had? Plenty of manufactured goods. They're an advanced society. So there wasn't that much that they would be getting from them. All right? Yes?
So you said, I asked you a question in the past. You said that Japan was like isolated for how long? Like a few centuries or 4 or 3 or 200 years, right? Because I remember the next time here's world history, like it showed up in the U.S. I believe, like what happens in
Yeah,
war, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That was the time when it broke. That's the time when Japan was like basically broke open, and during this time, this is the time to start.
Yeah, and basically, I don't want to get ahead of the game because that's going to come at a later date, but there's going to be an overthrow of the Tokugawa shogunate, and a new emperor is going to come to power who's going to allow for Japan to make deals and have business with the West. But that's a much later story, Meiji Restoration. Okay, I want to close with talking about China.
Yeah. And Vietnam.
Where we last left China, they are controlled by the Mongol Yuan dynasty, right? And that's kind of a weird thing. We got to remember that when the Mongols rule China, they're foreigners ruling China, right? They're outsiders. They're not Chinese, all right? So when the Mongols are ruling China, it's a relatively small Mongol population that's dominating a massive Chinese population. All right? In 1368, a Chinese dynasty is going to rise up and overthrow and oust the Mongols. And this is called the Ming Dynasty. And we can go back to our song, right? Shangzhou.
One pinching
All right. We're in a time crunch here, so next time we sing the song, we're going to do it much faster, okay? All right, so just same song, we're just going to pick up the tempo a little bit. So from 1368 all the way until 1644, those years are not to memorize. No, I don't have them memorized. I didn't remember those years until I rewrote these notes. Those years are not to be memorized. But what you should know is 1300s, 14, 15, 1600s, Ming Dynasty, all right? 1368 to 1644, the Ming Dynasty removes the Mongols, ousts the Mongols from power, and it restores a native Chinese dynasty to the Chinese state. The first Ming emperor, he's known as the Hongwu Emperor. Hongwu. Hongwu.
He has a funny name as well.
He's got a much longer name. That's the name he adopts as emperor, but there's not much for our purposes that we need to know for AP World about him outside of the fact that he's the first Ming emperor. The Ming Dynasty will reestablish a strong, centralized rule in China based on Confucianism. Bless you. The Ming Dynasty will reestablish the importance of the civil service exams to create a large class of scholar gentry bureaucrats that can carry out the order of the dynasty. We'll establish a new capital city in China's present-day capital city of Beijing. And they will build a fortress to rule from within that capital city that is known as the Forbidden City. You guys have probably seen images of this before. Or here is the whole complex, which is literally hundreds of buildings within the Forbidden City. This is all the Forbidden City. And it's forbidden because regular people couldn't go in there. You wouldn't be allowed. It was not for you. It was for the dynasty and it was for the bureaucrats. All right? That was it. Now, over time, again, spoiler alert, we're going to deal with this much later, as every emperor of China would be in the Forbidden City from the Ming Dynasty up until the end of the Chinese dynastic rule in 1912, eventually those emperors will live their entire lives within the Forbidden City and become very disconnected from the world around them and very easily manipulated by their bureaucrats. The bureaucrats are getting out and seeing what's going on. The emperors are being often fed a lot of information. So it's gonna keep the emperors safe and secure within the Forbidden City, but it's going to often or eventually lead to their isolation from the rest of the state, and a lot of corruption is going to come from that. But we'll talk about that at a later date.
Why is there mounted on the front of the castle? I mean, the city.
Why is it where? Oh, a picture of him? Yeah. Well, because this is a present-day picture. So yeah, that's a good eye to see that. Wow, I did not even notice that down there. But yeah, it's just a modern picture. So Mao is important now. And now you could go here. Like tourists can go into the Forbidden City. It's a tourist site now. So the Ming Dynasty established the Forbidden City in their new capital. They will sponsor some explorations themselves. In the early 1400s. And we're going to talk more about this guy at a later date, so let me just briefly mention him now. The Ming Dynasty will sponsor an admiral named Zheng He, Z-H-E-N-G-H-E. We've already mentioned him briefly. No, he was a traveler. He was an admiral. He was a sailor. He was a captain of ships.
He was a Muslim guy too.
He was also Muslim. He was also like 6'6". He was also a eunuch.
Yay!
Eunuch. Ah, we've never talked about eunuchs in here. Okay, let me give you my brief. Yeah, we've already had issues with you, Tyler. We're not going to go there. Let's just say eunuchs wouldn't have a lot of money in Vietnam. No. Okay, so a eunuch is a castrated male. All right. And throughout human history, so essentially a eunuch is a guy who typically as a young boy has the parts of him removed that allow him to ever have kids down the road. And so oftentimes through human history, I can't believe to this point in AP World History we haven't talked about eunuchs yet. Oftentimes in world history, you see royal houses, you see the kings, often being closest served by eunuchs. Because what do you never have to worry about if one of your closest advisors is a eunuch? Yes. He's not going to mess with your wife, nor is he going to have his own son that is going to get upset and maybe stab you in the back. All right? So oftentimes, and this goes back into ancient Rome and Greece and obviously in China, eunuchs are oftentimes some of the closest advisors, the closest to the emperor. Now, they often, because they're often castrated as like young boys, they don't have like, there's like no testosterone coursing through their veins. So they don't end up being like twisted teenagers like we have in our class, nor do they often, you know, they're going to have higher voices, they're not going to grow beards, there's going to be like physically different because that hormone is gone. So anyway, that's the eunuchs. So Zheng He is one of those guys. And guess what? They would often have little pouches on their sides where they would carry around that which was once removed from them. Because history. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, they, like me, they carry guns in the pockets.
So Zheng He happens to be a eunuch, but that's not the most important thing about him. That's not the most important thing about him. Most important thing about him is he's going to be arguably one of the greatest travelers that the world has ever seen. You know, you could put Zheng He right up there with a Marco Polo and Ibn Battuta, but Zheng He was doing it on the open seas. So Christopher Columbus or Ferdinand Magellan, Zheng He was right with him. All right, and Zheng He would travel from China all the way throughout the Indian Ocean into West Africa. There are some crackpot historians that actually believe that Zheng He's expeditions made it all the way to the Americas. They're wrong, but they wrote books and sold a lot of copies, and they got relatively famous for that. But we'll talk about that at a later date. So they early on sponsor these expeditions of Zheng He. And they go out and they find, and Zheng He experiences a lot of different places in the world and finds a lot of cool things. He goes to Africa, and he gets giraffes. And he's like, whoa, we don't have these in China. And he takes them back, and he's like, look at everything we got. And eventually the Ming Dynasty, the rulers of the Ming, who are spending huge amounts of money on these expeditions, look at what Zheng He's bringing back. And they're like, okay, those are cool. We'll throw them in the zoo. But what else you got for us? And what do the Chinese recognize? That the stuff they're finding outside in the wider world is not as good as the stuff that they already have. China's like the most advanced society in the world, right? And so these expeditions aren't bringing anything new and cool besides giraffes. And so the Ming eventually say, you know what? This is not worth our expenditure. And we're going to stop these expeditions. And they, in fact, they're going to scuttle, which is a Navy word meaning sink a bunch of good ships. They're going to scuttle Zheng He's fleet. We don't need this anymore. We're going to focus in on ourselves. And China, much like Japan, is going to start becoming more insular, not seeing any need to deal with the outside world, which is going to work for a few centuries. But eventually, as those European countries, in continued competition with each other and continually trading with the rest of the world, they're going to rise up and become more powerful than China itself. You had a question over here?
Yeah, but what if they're like, you said that they will want to trade with anybody, wouldn't that make them isolated?
Yes, they are. They're going to be isolated,
But they're so
powerful that that's kind of okay for a while. That they're okay for a while. A little bit more about the Ming. They will establish a policy as they're going to have some economic troubles. Partly from counterfeiting their flying money. Remember the flying money developed earlier in China? Paper money is easy to counterfeit. So they're going to develop a new economic policy that relies more so on silver as a currency, like actual silver as a currency. And so, for example, the people of China, the peasants of China, when they have to pay their taxes to the empire, where they would have formerly paid in rice, because they grow rice and they pay their taxes in rice, now they've got to pay their taxes in silver. And this is going to be very convenient, because at the time this is happening, there's a lot of silver going to be making its way out of Japan into China. But at the same time, the Spanish have opened up a mountain in South America, present-day Bolivia, called Potosi, that is filled with silver. And the Spanish Empire is going to be extracting millions and millions of tons of silver. And much of that silver is going to make its way into China, right? For those Chinese goods that the Spanish want, like the jades and the porcelains and the silks. And so they're going to be trading, and silver is going to start entering into Ming China and become the most important currency in China, which is really good for a while. But as more and more silver starts entering into China, it's ultimately going to devalue that silver itself. Guys, what happens if the United States government, we already said the U.S. government's money is not based on anything. What happens if we just start printing more and more dollars? Very good. It will deflate the currency, which causes inflation of prices. It raises prices, makes everything else more expensive. You guys had economics last year, you probably heard of some of this stuff, right? So ultimately, what is good for the Ming Dynasty eventually starts to cripple the Ming Dynasty. And by 1644, the Ming Dynasty will fall. We'll talk about that in a moment. We've got 4 minutes left, and I'm going to use them all. Like India, like Japan, China will also have contacts with the outside world, starting with, take a guess, the Portuguese. The Portuguese will establish an early trading city. Yes, sir?
I was going to guess.
Yes?
Macau.
Very good. The Portuguese will establish an early trading city in a city called Macau. Do you guys know where Macau is?
Next to Hong Kong. Next to Hong Kong.
No, it's in my barn. Pretty good. That joke has been entertaining kids for years, let me tell you. Yes. Now, do you know what you do? Do you know what you do if your cow is suffering from mad cow disease? No, you send it to a psychologist. All right, let's move on. All right. Anyway, Macau is not actually in my barn. Macau is down in southern China. And Macau, much like Nagasaki or much like Goa, Macau becomes an important trading port city where the Portuguese will have contact with the Chinese. Now again, the Portuguese can't go conquering China. Can't do that. But they can establish a trade relationship, and the Chinese government says, okay, that's okay, we can do this down in Macau. And the Portuguese will lay claim to that city. Another city in southern China, which today goes by the name of Guangzhou, is called Canton in this time period. So write down the name of Macau and the name Canton, C-A-N-T-O-N. If it's a city in Michigan, it's Canton. If it's in China, it's Canton. It's a trading port city where European traders are going to be allowed access to Chinese markets. Now in 1644, the Ming Dynasty is going to be overthrown by another outside Chinese dynasty called the Qing, Q-I-N-G. Ironically enough, the Ming Dynasty was having trouble with peasant uprisings. So they brought in some outsiders, some Manchurian people from up in the north of China to help them quell these peasant revolts. And then the Manchus that they brought in turned on the Ming, and they overthrew them. And so we have a new dynasty in China called the Qing Dynasty. We'll talk much more about these guys later in the year. But the Qing Dynasty are like the Mongols, outsiders. They're foreigners. They're Manchurians. They're not ethnically Chinese. But they will rule China from 1644 until 1912. They will be the last Chinese dynasty. Wan, Ming, Qing. Then we have the Republic. No more dynasty in China. Until 1912. The Qing will further expand China's borders. The Qing will further expand China's borders. Obviously now controlling Manchuria in the north. They'll push into Mongolia. They'll push into Tibet in the west. They will create a vassal relationship with Vietnam. Yes, sir?
French had it by then, but anyways.
No, the French by the earlier on, but the French aren't going to come until the 1880s and conquer Vietnam. Yes.
That map is very Chinese-centric or Sindhi-centric because you know the little corner in the left.
Okay.
No, on the left, bottom left.
Oh yes, yes.
All the islands in there belong to Vietnam. Just saying.
Okay. All right. Excellent. But the Qing Dynasty will ultimately want little interaction with the outside world. All right? They will forbid the practice of Christianity as well. And they will limit any contact with Europeans to those trading port cities, like Canton. They want to be isolated. They're going to have little contact with the outside world. Because to them, the outside world has nothing to give them. We will talk much more about the Qing at a later date. That is it for today.